Hello everyone, my name is Waleed and I'm working as a software engineer in safety culture in Sydney, Australia. In this video, I'm going to go through the three most important parts of your resume that you need to get right in order to get noticed by hiring managers and eventually get hired. Whether you are someone who has just graduated out of college and are looking for their first entry level role as a software engineer, or you are just an engineer at any other level looking to find a role at another company or looking to step up, or you are just someone in the IT industry who's looking for a little bit of inspiration to craft their best resume, you have landed in the perfect video. Now, the first most important section of your resume is the introduction section. The introduction section is used to give the hiring manager an overall feel and an idea of what your job title is and what your technical strengths are, and also any other strengths in terms of teamwork that you might bring to the company. So, for example, if you are just fresh out of university, and you were always interested in a front-end technology stack such as CSS, HTML, TypeScript, React, JavaScript, if that is your strengths and skills, then it would be a good idea to mention on your resume that you are a front-end engineer looking for a front-end engineer role, so that's how you will be getting evaluated. If you're someone who's already in the industry, it would still be a good idea to mention your job title just so the hiring manager understands and knows that where you would be best placed in case you were hired. Now, once you've mentioned your position title, the next thing I would go about mentioning is your technical strengths and skills. So for example, throughout university, if you were really good at Java, for example, and you were aspiring to become a backend engineer, it would be a good idea to mention that you are really well skilled in Java and you understand it quite deeply. If there's a bunch of other tools and skills that you feel that you have been proficient at, for example, you might be good at Java, Go, or DevOps, or just infrastructure tooling, etc., it would be a good idea to mention a list of those strengths. But just make sure not to keep those lists too long, because everyone in the industry understands that you cannot be good at every single thing. Hiring managers also want to understand what you can bring to a company, what your individual strengths are apart from your technical strengths, who you are as a person. So for example, during university, you might be really good at teamwork. You might have involved in a few teamwork related projects. So for example, with your friends, you might have built certain projects, or you might held several internships where you might have had to work in a team. How did you go about working in a team, and what your strengths were? If you were a really good team player, if you were good at managing your team, how did you do it and what challenges did you face? So it would be a good idea to also mention a list of your soft skill strengths, so to speak. Lastly, for the introduction section, I would try to keep it as concise and short as I possibly can, because remember, a hiring manager has hundreds of more candidates to assess and hundreds of more resumes to look into before they look into your resume. So they're short on time and they usually only have a few seconds to decide whether your resume is going to go into the bin or it's going to be considered. So keep that point in mind and have a short and concise intro. Now let's move on towards the second part of your resume. In fact, I would say that this is so important that this forms the backbone of your entire resume. And this part is a list of the past jobs that you might have held, or past internships that you might have held. So basically your experience in a nutshell. As a general rule of thumb, make sure to always list your jobs or internships held in chronological order. So basically the one that you have done the most recently goes to the top, and then so on and so forth. Now for each and every one of your previous job or position held or internships held, I would go on about describing one of the most impactful projects that I would have done as part of that job. So for example, I might have worked at uplifting the user interface of an authentication or signups or something like that, which might have helped hundreds of customers to go through that flow and benefit. So if I've done something like that, I would mention that, and I would mention the metrics associated with that, like how many customers did I impact, what was the business impact of that. So it would be good to quantify your impact into numbers as much as possible. Sometimes that might not always be possible, which is also fine. But whenever you find that your business impact that you brought can be quantified, make sure to include some numbers. I will post a small example of how that looks like in terms of a bullet point in this video, so make sure to check that out. Now, one more thing that I would also mention as part of every previous position held or internship held is I would describe all the learnings that I've gone through. So if I have learned a new programming language as a result, or if I've learned a new framework as part of a programming language, I would mention that. If I went through a difficult phase in my job, for example, if I was part of a difficult team, or or if there were some associated challenges, I would mention those just to highlight my technical and soft skill strengths that I gained from this previous role. Moving on to the third important part of your resume. Now, this part would be extra important to you if you are a fresh graduate of IT and you are just trying to make your entry into the market. You may not have any internships or any previous positions at this stage, and so it would be a good idea to mention a list of all the projects that you have contributed to in part of your university or as part of any activities that you might have done. You might have worked independently as a solo developer in a mobile app. It would be a good idea to mention all of that over here. Now, the hiring manager might pay extra attention to your list of projects that you have contributed to if in case you don't have a previous internship or a previous role. It would be a good idea to include a GitHub repository link to a project that you might have worked with so that it might be easy for the hiring manager to quickly go and have a look as to what you did. If you ended up contributing to code, how did you contribute to it? So that's a really good place to include GitHub links over there. If your project has a public facing link, for example, if it was an application that the hiring manager can go download, or if it's just a web app that you can provide the URL to, that would be excellent. And as always, I would go on and mention all the technical skill set that I've learned as part of implementing that web application. You can mention in bullet points all the specific technicalities that you ended up learning. So for example, if you were working on the front end, you could mention particular stuff in React that you ended up leveraging. So you might have used use effect, for example, which is a hook in React. How did you learn that? So guys, these are the three most important sections of your resume that I believe you need to get right in front of the hiring manager so that you can stand an excellent chance of being called for the interview. And when you are called for your interview, usually the interviewer will look at your resume and go through all of the points that you would have listed, and that might form the whole bulk of your interview. Also, while crafting my resume, I would take great care to mention the detail in as much clarity as possible. Now, what that means is it's important to structure all of your content so it's more clear and it's as concise and it's also readable. Putting all of your contributions and achievements into bullet points to make it more readable is a really good idea. So make sure you do that. It's also a good idea to have adequate spacing, but not too much between in each of the individual sections, because you want to make your resume as readable as possible to the hiring manager, who just has a few seconds to decide whether they should ask you for an interview or not. Now, any other sections apart from these three, in my experience, are not as valuable or they don't contribute as much in the hiring manager's decision. Some of the things that you could include after these sections is mentioning any list of certifications that you might have completed. So for example, you might have done an Azure certification. It would be a good idea to mention it over there. If your hobbies are related to technology in general, it would be a good idea to mention your hobbies. But usually, as a rule of thumb, I try to keep this section as short as possible because this is not the point where the hiring manager is trying to focus. So make sure that you contribute as less effort to these next sections as you possibly can, because you want to focus most of your efforts in the first three sections as mentioned in this video. That's it, guys. I hope you found this video incredibly useful. And if you did, please don't forget to click that thumbs up icon and don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.